for the other half. Because let me tell you, when that half gets ripped out of you and you have to stand on your own, it's not nice. It's not as romantic after saying, this is my better half, when your better half gone and you just sitting, struggling, miserable and alone. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Our Mess, His Canvas. I am your host, Juvon. Today I just wanted to talk about some of the questions that may have come out of the last episode. How do you get yourself to a place where you have lost yourself in a role, in an identity? How did you not see it happening? Is it a case where you had low self-esteem? Were you idolizing this person? Was it a lack of self-love? I was back and forth with God on this so many times because I felt like, God, I was so intentional. I am so intentional about every decision I make. Maybe it's a trauma response. Maybe I just made one too many mistakes and I just was like, you know what? I don't like the feeling of being chastised and scrutinized for the decisions that I've made. I don't like the feeling that comes with regret. So let me just make sure, cross all my T's and dot all my I's and make sure that when I'm going into something, I'm going in with all of the questions answered, all of the gray areas cleared up. Let me make sure of that. So I was kind of confused as to how it is I ended up here in the first place. I've had the time to sit and think about it. And I would say it comes down to a few things. I wanted to talk a little bit about one thing first. So one time, you go to church and the pastor would say, anybody had a testimony this week? Anybody want to talk about something great that's happened to them this week? Anybody want to talk about a blessing they had this week? And you put your hand up. And I don't know, my experience was always, I put my hand up and the mic goes in the opposite direction. So, over time, you get used to your hand going up as a routine, not your hand shooting up because you want to share. I remember there was this one time the pastor said something like, anybody have any flaws? How many of y'all have flaws? And so, I did my routine, threw my hand up there, not thinking anything of it. And just out of the corner of my eye, I'm seeing movement in my direction. And before I knew it, there is a gush of wind in my face and a mic in front of my lips. I was so taken aback. I was in so much shock. I just said the first thing that came to my mind. And I think I said something along the lines of, I have an attitude and I have low self-esteem or something like that. And can I tell you, they may not have been things that I believe to be true about myself, but it was the first thing that came to the top of my head as a response to a question about my flaws. And it would have been from things that I've heard before when I was growing up. I was in elementary or primary school. I always had a frown. So I'd always have this stern, very serious look on my face. And I never used to smile. So as an adult looking at a child, they always thought, oh, she have an attitude. And so I heard that all the time. I went to 2 different primary schools, 2 different secondary schools. It's something that I've heard. And especially in primary school or elementary school. So that was at the top of my head. I never used to smile because I don't like small talk. So I felt as if I have a serious face and I don't smile. Maybe that might save me from having to engage in some kind of small talk or the teacher don't have to pay me any extra attention. Anyway, I can't exactly remember where the idea of me having low self-esteem came from. It was in there. It was on there. And so those were the 2 responses that I gave at the time. And as I said, I probably did not believe that that was true about me. However, those were the first things that came to the top of my mind. And it probably came there because I did not know myself enough to tell you, well, based on what I know about me to be true, these are my flaws. I just automatically regurgitated something that I've heard, and I may not have taken it on as an identity, or I may not have taken it on as the truth about who I was, but it was in there for me to pull on when faced with a question. And I think that was definitely one of the issues, getting myself to a place where I was just so wrapped up. I did not get a chance to know who I was. I may not say get. I did not spend the time getting to know myself on a deep, intimate level, like me. who I was. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, you get yourself into a relationship, a serious relationship. That was the case for me. I got myself into a very serious relationship fresh out of school, and there is the purity culture that we try to maintain. Whenever somebody realizes, okay, y'all are a couple, they realize that there is a seriousness, there is an urgency when you're getting married, because you don't want to burn, you don't want to sin, you don't want all of these things to happen in a time where I should have been spending getting to know myself, getting to know who I was, getting to know my strengths, getting to know my weaknesses, getting to know my flaws, getting to know the things that make me who I am. I didn't spend that time. I did what everybody else was doing at the time. You know, you get yourself into a relationship. And that played a big part in me not getting to know myself. So when I get into that part of your relationship where you are now being told, well, I think that this is off about you. I think that this is wrong about you. I think that you lacking in this particular area. Me being in a place where I did not know myself, I couldn't shut it down at that point and say, no, that's not true. So I started to take it and think about it, and I said, maybe this is true about me. Maybe I do have these flaws. Maybe I really am lacking in this specific area. And when that is being presented to me, I felt as if, okay, well, I have to fix this part of me that is a flaw. I have to correct this or build up or improve in this particular area because I'm lacking. Not understanding projection, not understanding the way in which someone who may be experiencing their own form of insecurity could project how they feel onto you. And if you are in a place where you do not know who you are and you do not know what is true about you and what is an inaccurate description of who you are, you will hold on to things that people say, the labels that people put on you, the way in which you are described, whatever idea or whatever perception or the version that they have of you in their mind, you can hold on to that. And so that was my experience. I held on to some things, some ideas about myself that were not necessarily true. And so I found myself always in a place where I needed to try to prove. When I realized, okay, well, no, I don't think that this is true about me. I try to justify certain things. I wasn't recognizing, and this is another point, I was not recognizing the characteristics of an individual who they themselves are struggling with certain issues. So if I am in a place where I am having a hard time trying to recognize, okay, you coming at me this way is not because of me. It is because you have some stuff going on, and I can separate myself from what you are saying and recognize what the problem is. I was in no way proficient in executing that. In no way. I was not aware of it. I was not knowledgeable on that. So that was also another very important aspect. Being able to separate the meaning behind, I don't want to use the word tantrum, but for want of a better word, for the purpose of this context, a tantrum. Like when a baby throws a tantrum, you can't take what they say personally in that moment. They might be hungry, they might be tired, they might be just upset about something else, and then you get it. And as their parent or as an adult, you can identify, okay, I see what the need here is. The need is that you are tired. The need is that you really are hungry. The need is that you're upset about the fact that we had to leave the playground early and you're still mad about it. So being able to separate what that person is really feeling and to separate you from the fact that they are coming at you is an indicator that I was missing a lot. Nobody fights with a child in a tantrum. And so I felt like, well, if you're coming at me this way, then I have to come back. Nobody fights with a baby when they're in a tantrum. I'm not referring to anyone as a baby. I'm just using the example. I hope that you get where I'm coming from. So in my personal experience, when it comes to answering the question of how do you get yourself to a place where you lose yourself in a role, lose yourself in an identity, I can tell you that it could have been one for the fact that I really did not take time by myself to understand and to get to know who I was, to understand my personality, to know or be aware of all of these things. Why I didn't get that time, why I didn't spend that time, because the norm at the time was, you get yourself, that was around the time where people, they talk about high school sweethearts. You come right out of school, you get into a relationship, you marry this person, you spend happily ever after. And in that whole timeline, there is no time carved out for getting to know you. So you spend that time getting to know somebody else on a very intimate level, get to know all of the things about them. And now when you are now put in a place where somebody is telling you all of these things about who you are, you don't even know if it's true. You do not know where it's coming from. You do not know if it's just a projection of some insecurity or some deep-seated fear. Another big part that played into me losing myself is where I placed my worth. One of the ways in which I know that I had found my worth there was the fact that I put the responsibility of the source of certain needs on somebody else. What does that mean? I put the responsibility of getting my joy on somebody else. I put the responsibility of the source of my peace, the source of my joy, the source of my happiness, the source of just fulfillment. I put that on somebody else as if it was their responsibility. And all of that stemmed from, again, me not spending that time getting to know myself. You get to that place of being terrified of being alone. I can't be by myself. I can't do these things by myself. You mean I have to do this by myself? I have to go here by myself? So just the idea of that was just throwing me. And I felt, no, you need to pair up. You need to have a partner. You need to do life with people. So I can't do life by myself. That's wrong. Right? No. So me not spending that time alone by myself, learning how to source joy when it's just me and God, finding how God can source your joy, finding how God can direct you to your source of happiness, letting God show you the path to peace and get you on a path that can eventually lead you to fulfillment. Spending that time alone would allow you to get to know yourself, but it also gets you to a place of dependency on God, because now God has placed these things in you. You don't have to depend on somebody else to be a source of joy. You don't have to depend on somebody else to be a source of peace. And so where I got it wrong is that I am not happy, so that's your fault because we didn't do this. This doesn't happen, so now I am unhappy about this, and that's your fault. There are certain things that I don't see happening, and so that is making me unhappy, so now that is your fault. And whereas part of it could be true, I cannot put the whole responsibility. I cannot put the responsibility on somebody else for me being happy. And I never understood that until, of course, I got the opportunity to be by myself. And in a situation that is just so, I cannot look to it now for that to be a measure of me being happy. Where are you going to look now? This thing is that you can't get happiness from that. Where are you going to get your happiness now? You can't get joy from that, so where are you going to get your joy now? You can't get peace from that, so where are you going to get your peace now? And it is definitely just so eye-opening and mind-blowing how much I just had it all, my whole idea of what I was conditioned to believe, or how I was conditioned to think, or based on my level of understanding. I thought that is why you get into a relationship. I would bring some of this and you bring some of that and we come together and we become a whole. No, because when that person is no longer in your space, they're no longer here, they're no longer in a position to provide you with those things, what you going to do? And now we come out of the relationship, you come out, now we see so many people coming out of relationships, and before you could even blink, they jump in with somebody else because they are so terrified of being by themselves. They don't get to spend that time, and now when they have a lot of issues on the inside, they can't deal with none of those things. They start projecting, and then somebody else who is on the receiving end of that projection, they don't know themselves. They don't know all of the things that they are and what they aren't. They don't know what to be true about them and what isn't. And so you take all of those things and you're like, well, maybe I am this, maybe I am that, maybe I am. And now you go into overdrive trying to fix and trying to prove that this is not the type of person that I am. Sitting back now, it makes perfect sense. Okay, I see where I went wrong. And again, I have made it abundantly clear that I'm not taking responsibility, because yes, I can take the L and say, this is where I messed up, this is where I went wrong, and this is how me having these setbacks coming together with another individual who have their own baggage and their own challenges, but not in a place yet to really sit and deal with those things, is not me taking responsibility for the actions of anybody else. Me being in a place where I can acknowledge that, it is just me saying, I see where I had a part to play and how it was so difficult for me to recover, because I was so intertwined and buried deep inside of a role, deep inside of a person. And, it made recovery very, very difficult. Getting to know yourself, getting to spend that time with yourself. Being single is not a curse. It is a blessing. It is a blessing when you approach it from, I am going to get to know myself. I'm getting to know myself without the expectations, without the standards that need to be met, without checklists of qualities that you're supposed to possess. I think we spend more time in our youth, after you finish with your schooling or whatever, and before you jump into a committed relationship, enjoying life single is not a curse. Spend that time dating yourself, if I may say. I would just take myself and go to the movies, or take myself and just go to dinner sometimes, just by myself. And I'm okay with that. And, there was a time in my life where I would not go anywhere if it means that I have to go by myself. I'm not going. I was so terrified of the idea of being somewhere by myself that I just decided, if I have to go there by myself, I'm not going. And so I just never went anywhere. And me not going anywhere, I'm frustrated. I just feeling unseen. I feel like my needs not being met. And whereas, yes, you could say, yeah, well, you're gonna go on a date or whatever. Yeah, sometimes there is an atmosphere or an environment that becomes a point where if you're not in a place to articulate, or you don't even have it within you to really express with words, I'm kind of frustrated by the way in which I feel like all of your needs are my responsibility. If someone is not in a place where they can articulate that, and if someone else is not in a place where they can receive that, it just will never be said, it will never be expressed, and you just have two people in a place, and it's just a level of toxicity that's starting to build. In reflection, based on my experience, I did not spend time getting to know myself. I did not spend that time by myself learning my personality, learning who I am, without anybody else. When I got to a place where I started to be neglected, I got into no, I can't be by myself, and I have to. And so you find yourself just burying yourself deep in somebody, with the hope that you don't have to spend that time by yourself, with the hope that you don't have to be alone, with the hope that you don't have to be in solitude. So looking back was definitely a sure way that I found myself so buried, so intricately folded into a role, into a personality, into a person, into the wrong place. I would say if you are in a place where some of these things sound a little familiar, it may have answered a question, or it may have illuminated a path, or have brought some enlightenment or some sort of understanding as to an experience that you didn't have language for. I would just leave with this: spending a period of your life, or spending some sort of time alone before getting into a committed relationship, has so many benefits. You get to know yourself on an intimate level. When you do get yourself into that relationship, you're going as a whole. I know that it's things that we may have heard growing up, but really understanding that what that means when the person right next to you, like, it's not gonna make sense. But sometimes it takes working some things out and learning some lessons after something tragic happens, after a calamity, after a fallout, after the end of a thing. So I would just urge maybe the younger ones, you're in a time of solitude, you're in a time of singleness, you're in a time where you're spending some time alone and all you really want to do is to go out there and be in a romantic relationship with somebody else. If you are dependent on that person to be a source of joy and peace and all good things and happiness and that sense of fulfillment, then I would urge you to rethink that whole concept. And do not be terrified of spending time by yourself. Don't be terrified or don't be afraid. Don't think of it as a curse. Enjoy your singleness. Enjoy that time alone. Enjoy getting to know yourself so that when you are whole and you're ready to go out there and another individual is whole and they're ready to go out there and you all happen to come together, it's two whole people coming together as opposed to somebody who is looking for the other half. Because let me tell you, when that half gets ripped out of you and you have to stand on your own, it's not nice. It's not as romantic after saying, this is my better half, when your better half gone and you just sitting, struggling, miserable and alone. So that is what I would leave with today. I hope that this has been impactful in some way or the other. Again, I would just remind you that I am speaking based off of my experience. I am sharing out of my heart and not at all a relationship guru or a professional on any level. I am just speaking based off of the things that I have learned from my time and my experiences. So if this has resonated with you in any way, leave a comment. If you need to ask me a question, you can leave it in the comments. If it's a question that you feel like you need to ask privately, you can shoot me an email, and I could provide whatever insight. But again, I'm not a professional. I'm just giving advice based off of my experience in the hope that maybe somebody else is experiencing something similar and would like some sort of perspective. That's what I can offer. So my email is ourmesshiscanvas@gmail.com. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram, ourmesshiscanvas. Until next time, thank you for tuning in and have an amazing rest of your week.